Hi, I'm Eric from Mann Lake, and welcome to the August edition of the Western States Beekeeper Buzz. We're here in Northern California, so we're still in the middle of summer. Fortunately, it's been a little bit cooler than it was last month. Last month we had nonstop 105 to 110 degree days. It's been a little bit less, I wouldn't say cooler, a little bit less hot so far in August, which is a pleasant change for us. We're going to get into a couple of hives here. These were both built off of packages in May. There's one big difference between the two. This hive here was installed into a hive with brand new foundation. This hive here was installed into a hive with drawn foundation. And you're going to see a big difference between the two when we get into these. Couple things before we hop into these that I'll bring up. One is when it's the summer and it's hot, and you're especially here in California where everything's really dry, be careful with your smoker. You know, here we're lucky we're on a cement pad, but just don't set your smoker off into the dry weeds where you can start a fire. We have enough fires in California without beekeepers starting them with a smoker. The other thing that I will bring up, this time of year, we're getting into yellow jacket season. Yellow jackets can be a real problem for us. So there's a couple things you can do to kind of guard against those buggers getting into your hive and causing a lot of problems. One, you can put up a yellow jacket trap. They're pretty effective. But the biggest thing you can do is really inspect the outside of your hives and make sure that there's no cracks between the boxes, between the lid and the box, you know, knots that have fallen out, because these bees are pretty good at defending the entrance, especially if we have an entrance reducer in. Where problems come into play is when these yellow jackets can get in through the sides and little creases and corners. The bees just have a hard time defending that. And, you know, yellow jackets are physically stronger than honeybees. They're far more venomous. And once they get into the hive, they are going to cause problems. So let's not let them get into the hives to begin with. So we're going to get into these, and I'm going to show you some pretty glaring differences. And you'll see the advantages of using drawn foundation. So when you've got drawn foundation and those bees go out and they're collecting nectar, they can use that nectar to store as honey, and they don't have to use that nectar to draw the foundation out and make wax. So as you can see on this frame here, there's a little bit of capped honey, but all those cells are full of wet honey. So this hive looks pretty good in terms of its food stores. We're not going to extract any of this honey. We're going to leave this for the bees. As we get to the middle frames, there's a little bit more capped honey, and they'll cap the rest of that. I'm going to get this lid back on, and we're just going to take a quick peek at this other hive just for demonstration purposes, just so I can show you the difference between, you know, a hive that's got drawn foundation and storing a bunch of honey, and one that's new foundation, and I'm going to guess this doesn't have hardly any honey. So as you can see, there's virtually no honey stored. There's a little bit in the center cells, but for the most part, they're just drawing this foundation out. It's very light, not much going on there. Same with this frame here. There's a little bit of honey stored in there, but they haven't drawn this frame out all the way. A little bit better on the other side. We're going to need to feed this hive, because our honey flow here in California is pretty much a wrap. It's pretty much over. There's not much for the bees to work. So there's actually a decent amount of honey here. They've drawn this frame out really nice. Now we're in an ag area out here, so there's a lot of forage for these bees. But there's a definite difference between these two hives in terms of the amount of honey that's stored from one to the other. All right, we're going to go ahead and treat these hives. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, we're going to treat with Apivar, which is an amitraz-based contact strip. There's a couple reasons we've chosen Apivar. The first reason is it's not temperature sensitive. So in the heat of the summer, it's not going to be harmful to the bees. There are some other treatments that are really effective, but man, if you use them in the heat of the summer, you got some problems. It's just really hard on the bees. The other is we're not extracting honey out of either of these hives. Apivar is one of those treatments that is not food grade. So you cannot use that treatment if you're going to extract this honey and eat it. One of the things about Apivar is it is a chemical based treatment, so we're going to glove up and keep ourselves from having direct skin contact with these strips. So use some chemical resistant gloves and just be safe, be smart. I'm also going to give you a little bit of an Apivar hack here. They've got these little tabs that I'll show you on the strips that are like little wings that allow you to set them between the frames. What we're going to use is toothpicks. For me, it makes hanging the strips a little bit easier. So the rule of thumb with Apivar is 2 strips per 10 frames of bees. We're going to put these right in the cluster of bees. We want to set these towards the center of the hive, kind of kitty corner, and with a couple frames in between them. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to stick a toothpick through this hole. And I'm going to slide these right in here. And it's as simple as that. Okay, I'm going to leave these strips in for 6 weeks. It's very important when using Apivar to not leave these strips in longer than the recommended time period. What ends up happening with any kind of medicated strip, as the medication in the strip itself starts to degrade, you risk resistance. And the last thing we want is mites that are resistant to the treatments that we're using to kill them. So just keep that in mind. Make sure that at that 6-week period, you pull these strips out and discard them. Again, even when you're pulling them out, put your gloves on, be safe, be smart. So to kind of recap what we went over today, it's still summer. We've still got to keep some things in mind. One is we don't want to disturb these hives too much. We don't want to open them up all the time. So our inspections are going to be pretty infrequent, and they're going to be very basic. The other thing is we still got to make sure that we've got water for these bees. They need the hydration. It's vital. It's super important. The other thing to keep in mind, and I talked about this earlier, is this is the time of year we start thinking about going into winter, even though it seems like a long time from now. So we want to make sure these bees are fed, that they're healthy, that there's not a bunch of mites, and all these issues that we deal with as beekeepers. We want to make sure that going into winter, we've got colonies that are as healthy and well fed as possible. That's what's going to give us the best chance of having a viable colony coming out of winter. So have fun with it. Leave comments and questions if you've got them. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you watching. Hit like and subscribe, and we'll catch you next month.